Okay, public service announcement before I start this video. I'd like to briefly say that I know the Switch has its problems. I can see you angrily typing away all about the Nintendo Joy-Con drift problem that has been present in the news for quite some time now. But in this video, I'm going to be debating why the Switch is a very good console, but also what flaws need to be corrected to make this potentially one of the best consoles of all time. If you guys enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. It's free, it really helps put me in the algorithm, and it really means a lot. But without further ado, let's get into it. The first time the general public ever had any inclination that Nintendo were making a new console came in 2015. In 2015, Nintendo were losing a considerable amount of money after the failures financially of the 3DS and the Wii U. The 3DS was released in February of 2011, and while yes, it was a pretty good device and certainly showed a step in the correct direction for handheld game consoles, it was not a massively financially viable device. The device would sell for $250, which is quite a steep price when you consider the other handheld consoles of the time were cheaper. The DSi was only a 2-year-old console that was actually selling for $170, so that's already an $80 jump, which when you consider the demographic of users for the DS line to be younger people, no parent would normally spend that much on them for fear of it breaking. This caused Nintendo to seriously reevaluate how much they were selling the console for, and they had to reduce the price to $170, which massively cut their profit margin on the console. The 3DS did, however, do quite well in terms of units sold after this reduction, as it sold nearly 76 million units, which means it did actually sell more than the Xbox One family, which only sold 51 million. But then Nintendo decided to create the 2DS, which was basically a tablet in the shape of a DS. The idea of the 2DS was that if there were no hinges, nothing was likely to snap. But in the 7-year lifespan of a 2DS from 2013 to 2020, they only sold 8 million units, which is a financial travesty. Personally, I cannot find the profit information for the 3DS and 2DS systems, as I don't think they're public knowledge. But when you consider that the 3DS caused Nintendo to stop selling the standard DS, it probably wasn't a very efficient switch. DS sold 154 million units, and nearly a billion software units, which actually put it above the Nintendo Wii in terms of hardware and software units sold, and the Nintendo Wii is largely regarded the best console Nintendo ever made. As the DS line started to lose its traction a bit from being one of the dominant parts of the console market, Nintendo made the Wii U. The Wii U was designed to be the best of both worlds, a handheld unit and also a TV-based unit, and is probably where the Switch gained quite a few ideas for the console from. However, the Wii U had multiple failings, primarily financial. The Wii U sold 14 million units worldwide, which when compared to the original Wii, was nearly a tenth of the units sold by the Wii. In 2012, when the Wii U was announced, it was retailed for $300, which is a very expensive console for the time. And over 5 years of distribution, the Wii U only sold 14 million units, which was what caused the company to seriously reevaluate how they were creating consoles. The issues with the Wii U were simple. The game library wasn't great, other than your Mario games, Super Smash Bros, and later Breath of the Wild, and that's probably what caused people to even consider buying the console. But also, the handheld function could only work if your console was turned on and if you were near your console. So that ruined the portability of the Nintendo DS gamepad drastically in terms of the Wii U gamepad. The problem the Wii U faced during its inception and that it was marketed quite heavily as a handheld device, when in reality it wasn't. And for $300 you would hope it would have been a bit better at this. Both of these financial failures led to the Nintendo company to reconsider their design of video game consoles. Nintendo were notorious and well known for handheld family consoles, such as the DS, Game Boy, and other consoles like these, but the issues they had faced recently had been a steep price gap and underwhelming sales figures. So how could they produce a console that would be the way to fix these mistakes? How could you sell a console for the appropriate amount of money to regain some profit without overcharging so that the public do not actually even want to buy said console? And this is where Nintendo NX was first discussed back in 2015. But we didn't know anything about the console at this point. So let's discuss the reasoning behind Nintendo's decision to create the Nintendo Switch. Back in 2015, after the aforementioned failures of the Wii U and 3DS, investors were scared that the mobile gaming industry was going to wipe out the handheld console industry. A mobile game called Puzzles & Dragons created by Gung Ho had propelled this company ahead of Nintendo on the Osaka stock market in 2013. And Nintendo was starting to worry that their consoles were not going to be as profitable and therefore make the handheld gaming industry obsolete. What was stopping Nintendo from turning obsolete? Well, the video games they were selling were still breaking records, much to the shareholders' surprise. 5 Nintendo 3DS titles had sold more than 2 million copies in the second half in 2014. And these titles were Smash Bros, Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, Monster Hunter Ultimate, and 2 Yokai titles. If video games were actually going to a mobile world, as opposed to handheld consoles, why were these titles breaking records? Nintendo came up with a clever plan to open up their game universes to a mobile platform, which is why we got iconic games such as Pokemon Go, Pokemon Masters, Animal Crossing Camp, and Super Mario Run. So when did the idea for the Nintendo Switch begin? The Nintendo Switch concept was unknown. The company had outright said they wanted to produce a new game console with a new concept, and the late Satoru Iwata had even stated this in multiple public statements. And this is where the rumours started to circulate about the Nintendo NX. As there was no official evidence, the internet went wild with guessing when we would hear about the elusive Nintendo NX, and as such, fake leaks started to circulate around the world. Other questions were asked about the NX, particularly whether it be at E3 on the Nintendo presentation, and whether it be region locked as well. Satoru Iwata said that the former would be an empty presentation, whereas the latter could be considered. This sent the internet into a frenzy, the silence from Nintendo deafening most fans. Nothing was being said, and this nothing came out at E3 about the NX. The Nintendo Directs were also very quiet about the system. All that anyone knew was that it wouldn't replace the Wii U or the 3DS, but that it was its own concept, and that he would hear more in 2016. This is when information began to be leaked, but not from Nintendo, but from the Wall Street Journal. Supposedly, it was stated that the developers were getting software development kits for the NX, and that the console would use industry-leading chips. It was also leaked that it could be used as one mobile unit that could either be used with the console or taken on the road for separate use. So, the Wall Street Journal did get that leak right. This meant that people across the world started to get a decent idea about what the NX was going to be like. From what the report said, it seemed the console was in fact a replacement for the Wii U, or at least could communicate with the device to be used like the gamepad. However, there was still no talk of games on the consoles, what the console looked like, or even when it would be released, which thankfully Nintendo would reveal a year later, in 2015. The final steps were on their way. The console was given an official release date in 2016, stating it would release codename NX in March 2017. But it still wouldn't be getting a 2016 E3 presentation. But this went to Nintendo's most ambitious Legend of Zelda title yet, Breath of the Wild. Then a huge leak came, and as reported by Eurogamer, it stated that the console now would be an entirely portable mobile device, with 2 detachable controllers and could also connect to a TV for a traditional console experience. They had basically nailed the leak head on. They had even noted that the games would be on cartridges as opposed to discs. Though no one knew it at the time, this leak was actually spot on about the console, and looking back, it makes sense that no one quite believed it, because the idea for this console is very unique. Months had passed since the Eurogamer leak, and people were starting to panic thinking the console was going to be delayed past the 2017 release date. Even companies like Papa John's were being bombarded with tweets about the NX. It seemed that the console would never be released, until October 20th, 2016. The trailer had an amazing sound effect that was going behind it, and this song is widely synonymous with the Nintendo Switch nowadays. The song behind it was very upbeat, and it made the game seem almost quite engaging, interesting to play, and interesting to react with. The concept of the Nintendo Switch was becoming very, very clear as the trailer carried on. Everyone at this point was still going through the same mindset of, oh my god, what is this console capable of? And we'll learn throughout going forward in time that the console was capable of a lot more than originally perspective. The music behind this, as I've said, was a very, very good addition to the trailer, and it made the trailer even more impactful than it originally would have been. I remember when this trailer came out. I was 15, I was in college, and suddenly it felt like the gaming world was being turned on its head. The trailer was released with what would become the console's flagship title, Breath of the Wild, but also had features from Mario Kart 8, Skyrim, NBA 2K17, as well as Super Mario Odyssey, an unreleased Mario title. There were also features from Splatoon and the esports side of this game. Nintendo have released a console with an amazing soundtrack behind it and an amazing lineup of games that would be available on the new Nintendo console, which is what made this trailer so good. Everyone then suddenly needed to have the Switch. This could have been the most successful marketing ploy in the history of Nintendo's video game consoles, as the Switch was so heavily hyped up, and it really didn't disappoint, and it even released the two new titles of Splatoon 2 and Super Mario Odyssey. Other than other consoles that you have had to adapt your life around, the Switch was promoted as a console that worked around your life, which made it very appealing. It's launch day for the Nintendo Switch, and hype has been getting considerably boosted throughout the couple of months prior to the release. We know of multiple games coming to the console: Splatoon 2, Super Mario Odyssey, Breath of the Wild. But how did the console do on release day and the couple of weeks afterwards? Nintendo expected to sell 2 million units in March alone, and according to a fiscal report the month after, the console had sold closer to 3 million units in March. When the PS4 was launched, they sold 2.1 million units halfway through its first month, and Xbox sold 3 million units after 6 weeks. The Switch had been performing much better than Nintendo originally expected, and the supply for the console was quickly outgrown by the demand, and units were selling out everywhere almost instantly. In America and Japan, the Switch consoles were so difficult to get a hold of, and they were barely staying on the shelves in stores. Consumers even accused Nintendo of creating artificial scarcity to create artificial demand for the console to boost sales. Globally, it had not shorted the market, but in Japan and America, it certainly had, and it even led to statements stating that the console was being made as quick as possible to supply the demand for it. There was an abundance of eShop titles coming out at the same time, and it would be far more advantageous for Nintendo to undercut their own console's success, especially after the mass failure of the Wii U. In terms of practicality, making new games would make no sense if the supply for the console was not actually there. But why was the supply as bad as it was? With consoles that have been released recently, such as the PS5 and Xbox Series X, there is a global shortage of the parts, and the pandemic certainly has not helped matters of getting a hold of those parts to make the console. But the Switch didn't have this to deal with quite the same at the time. Supposedly, according to the Wall Street Journal, Nintendo was having to battle mobile companies such as Apple to get a hold of the parts. The Switch is basically a gaming tablet in terms of the hardware, and since it was built like a mobile device, it now had to face mobile device supply shortages. But these problems did not start when the Switch was launched. These issues had been prevalent ever since October of 2016, which was nearly a year beforehand. The Switch as of today, which is November of 2021, just over 4 years after the Switch's release date, is still one of the biggest contenders for the console market. The games console has now had massive games released, such as Super Smash Bros. Ultimate and its DLCs, Animal Crossing New Horizons, and Pokemon Sword and Shield. The console has, however, had problems throughout its lifeline. Issues with Joy-Con drift started to become prevalent in 2019, and Nintendo even had to publicly state that they were now paying for Joy-Cons to be repaired, and that if you'd already paid for one to be repaired, you'd be getting refunded. Although supposedly the new consoles are considerably better for it now, we won't know anytime soon. The games that have been produced for Nintendo Switch have also massively helped to boost its sales. Animal Crossing New Horizons released just before the pandemic, and as such, the sales that this game achieved were drastic. The game sold nearly 35 million units, as it gave people the capacity to travel to a foreign island and interact with their friends, even when they could not do so in person. Pokemon Sword and Shield became the third highest selling Pokemon game ever, selling nearly 23 million units. And Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, as always, would have been expected to hold the top spot, selling nearly 39 million units. Even Fortnite got the console onto the map as a much more family-friendly way to play the immensely popular Battle Royale title. Nintendo opening up its library to more options for games has undoubtedly helped the console make more money, with games such as Fortnite, Skyrim, Minecraft, and more recently even GTA to get onto the eShop. The Nintendo Switch seems to be on a fast track to becoming the most sold video game console of all time, and with the Switch Lite being out and the Nintendo Switch OLED soon to be released, we can assume that the Nintendo Switch will likely end up defeating the Nintendo Wii, and potentially even some of the PlayStation family. The Nintendo eShop library continues to see amazing titles and throwbacks being put onto it, such as the soon release of Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, and when they release Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword's remake. The game feels like it's tried massively to resurrect their old games for a brand new audience to experience this, and this is part of the charm of the Nintendo Switch. Is it the best console of all time? Probably not, but it's certainly a console that helped to keep the portable gaming market alive, and I would argue that without the Nintendo Switch, the handheld gaming market would almost certainly have died out in favour of the mobile gaming universe. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. It took me very long to make, and I hope you have enjoyed this. And let me know what other video essay style videos you want me to make, as I actually really enjoy making them. They do just take quite a bit of time. If you haven't already, please check down below that you're subscribed. Let me know what you thought of the video and leave a like while you're down there. Thank you very much guys, and I'll see you later. Peace out guys.